Hello guys, welcome to my new video. Today I will be talking about the object creation and what will be the good place to create them and when, basically. It came up because I work with lots of legacy code and I can see what problems arise when you do the things the less than optimal way. So let's get into it. I started up a small project that will be available on the GitHub link, which will be down below. It, we have basically my main program, which has two processors. These are to demonstrate the issues. Both of them depend on a subprocessor, which doesn't do much. Basically, it just uses some two services to calculate some value and then return it back to the processor. And the processor basically just returns the data. So the processor doesn't do much itself. The main part there, it depends on a subprocessor. So it needs subprocessor to calculate stuff. The first place where usually things happen and go really badly is in a constructor. So we've got like three constructors in this processor. This one, no dependency injection. Your subprocessor is created inside the constructor. The second one is you're mixing the DI with dependency injection with direct construction. So you have your service 1 and 2, which you know your subprocessor depend on, and then you create the subprocessor with it. And then you have the dependency injected constructor where you just inject the subprocessor. Now, if we go over all of them, I made a comment, so you can cheat. I cheated, and you can cheat as well with this one. So this one, in my opinion, very bad constructor, completely hides what you depend on. You need to just go inside the constructor, think about it, think about the code, and see like, ooh, you are creating something new here. Let me think about this. And also, so you depend on the specific implementation of the subprocessor. So basically, testing is very hard because you have to test the subprocessor with the processor as well. And if you have huge constructors like this gets really, really messy and you lose the context very easily. The second one looks a bit better, but in my opinion is the worst one. Um, Again, you're creating your dependency inside, you're not injecting it. What's worst about this even is that you are injecting stuff that your dependency needs. So you definitely rely on the implementation of the specific implementation. You are pretending that your class relies on the service 1 and service 2, but those are never used. Like the process doesn't need it. So the subprocessor basically is still dependency. So first problem that was all the problems that were here in this constructor are present in here. And what I think is even worse is if you are using some sort of container, like in C#, if you are using like an inject or autofag or something like that, you're mixing container injected um, services with your manually created services. So you might start to lose, like your dependencies might lose the respectable restrictions on number of creations, like the instance per lifetime scope. I use autofag, so I will reference autofag here. So if you say I only want ones, you might suddenly have different number of them. So I think this is like the worst kind of thing. You're messing up developers' mind with this, and you're misleading them basically. And the last one is the good one. So basically, you're declaring that your processor depends on your I subprocessor. Not much to add. You like your subprocessor? Good. You inject your subprocessor inside. You like some different implementation? Something a bit better, not something really basic like my one. Good. You just inject it. It's good. So that's my take on the constructors. Please, if you are doing, if you depend on something, just declare it in constructor. Don't try to construct it there and do these kind of silly things. Now, there is one thing that's might prevent you from doing that, and that is the dynamic dependencies. So imagine if you have a dependency which needs to be specific to your method call because you have some parameters which will be passed in via method, so you can't use it with a constructor. Well, you can use it with a constructor, but I would suggest that's not a very good idea. I mean, you can construct always a new object, new processor if you want, like depend on some ID or something like that. Create new processor and then do this whole thing. But from my experience, I think the constructors should be used to inject your services or your dependencies. So like this subprocessor, or if your subprocessor like this one, it depends on service one, service two. So yeah, so inject those. But I would not put data objects or identifiers or these kind of things inside the constructors. I find that that is not very useful. If you really need to have dynamic stuff, you can do it the bad way, super extremely bad way, which is you create a subprocessor. So this is my processor, it needs subprocessor. For whatever reason, I don't know, we might probably dispose of it later when we don't need it. So we just need it for some period of time. We don't need it for every for the whole existence of the processor. We have this subprocessor and we created it on the fly. And we are then using data object on it. And then we are possibly getting rid of it. Well, we are getting rid of it. So this is like really bad. If you have a huge class, which I'm not advocating because you probably shouldn't have big classes, but you need to go over, if you want to do something with this, you need to change something, you need to figure out what the dependencies are. You have to go over all this code just to find out that, oh, I actually depend on subprocessor. There is no way, if you have this kind of constructor, to find out that basically I depend on subprocessor. So this creates for you a lot of headache. You, you start to like having problems with even changing like the smallest things because, oh, I need to figure out where this constructor is called. I need to figure out where this special processing is happening. So it's very bad to do it this way. I would suggest alternative, which is basically you inject your dependency in sort of a way that allows you dynamic creation. In C# you use func. So right now I have a func which tells me if I invoke it, I will get my subprocessor back and I can use it then. I have my good method. So I just invoke what the func is, what that func gives me my subprocessor, and I can use it to calculate data objects and then possibly get rid of it. What's good about this? Two things. First of all, if you use containers for dependency injection, I think all of them have some sort of support for this kind of thing. So you're very good at basically respecting the instance counting, which happens in some sort of way in containers. So yeah, you might always get one, or you must always get the same one. You might get like different ones depending on how you're set up. And it's very easy to write this code with the containers. If you don't use containers, you're a manual guy, it's a bit problematic because actually you have to write this func. So I'm not sure if I have the func here. I should have it here. Program. No, I didn't use this one. Okay, so what I would write instead would be like lambdas and then two new subprocessor. So the bad thing about this one is I now have to inject the service one. So I need to create it. And if I had a func here, I would also need to write something like new service one or something like this. So uh, with the manual stuff, you're much more, you have to be much more expressive about your hierarchy tree if you're doing funcs. And that's why the containers help a lot with the creation. But in general, if you want to use the service just for a limited number of time, limited amount of time in certain part of your code, this is funcs or similar concepts in Java. I presume there is something similar, and you can quite easily limit the scope of the dependency, but still declare it as it should be declared. And it makes much easier for people to find out what's going on, what does my class depend on, and how can I change it without screwing up loads of other stuff. I think that will help you a lot. Okay, thank you all guys. Thanks for your time, guys. Please comment, like, subscribe, and let me know if you have any code issues or some interview issues or some ideas that you would like to discuss in the videos.